The Harathi Hinterlands is the fourth zone in Kryta, which is incredibly important for human characters as it serves as the finale for the Centaur War storyline, providing players with a sense of conclusion while opening up the rest of Tyria for future storylines, such as with the war against Zaitan. And today, I want to go across the map and highlight my top 10 personal favorite things that we can find within. And alongside that, I want to do something that I have been doing recently where I try to spice up the series and test out a few different things. For today, we are going again completely unscripted, but this time we are in-game, live. Let's run around and look at some stuff. In the number 10 spot is the Wynchona Woods. This is a very interesting area that I love a lot, and as we can see, it is just like a very densely wooded area. And a big part of this entire place are the bandits around here, plus just like a few other random creatures, where we can see this bandit camp right over here. And I always found this bandit tower to be really cool. Where another small spot that is basically part of this area that I love a lot and I've talked about a couple of times, and I guess I'll just highlight here, is this special bandit cave right over here where we can see the mark of the bandits. And as we go inside, we can just see a really beautiful area with the skylight to this waterfall, all these cabbages, and a door leading to somewhere else that we cannot access. But back through the woods itself, it just feels like a very classic like fantasy type of forest, kind of like what we see in Queensdale a little bit, and it makes sense since we are in Kryta. But one additional thing is that there is this spider cave here, and we can see a bunch of spider cocoons all around here where there is an event where Seraph will be captured and you have to break them out, and then you go and fight the big spider in here, which is a really cool spider. And this entire cave is just a really cool looking cave, and it provides a very cool aesthetic where you're going through like a very interesting like kind of like densely wooded area, and then you come across spider cocoons, and then suddenly there is a cave with a massive spider that you have to defeat. Just a very classic and fantastic vibe. In the number 9 spot is Hidden Ourobon, and this is just a very cool area visually, as we can see right here, but it features a few cool things. We're over here near the entrance to this entire cave system. We can find this shining blade agent Kimberly, and this starts an event where we can fight a giant, one of the few champion giants that you can fight with the original release of Vanilla Guildbridge 2. But as we come through here and explore this entire area, we get some more cool shots with like the cool waterfall and just a bunch of oozes all around here, plus a couple of additional entrances. And we can come through here and see a very gorgeous area featuring one of the mastery insights that were added to Vanilla Guildbridge 2 in order to help add more like mastery points for players to use to level up their masteries. And we can see it is at the base of this incredible beautiful looking waterfall, and it leads down into this river, and we see more waterfalls over there that are just incredible. And a small little detail that I've always loved a lot is this little door right here, which just looks really cool, and it does actually open up during events and allows you to go into the end of the Centaur area. But largely just a very beautiful and aesthetic area with a ton of waterfalls and foliage and just an interesting cave to explore through. In the number 8 spot is the Centaur War, and this is a very general answer, and basically Harathi Hinterlands, being the fourth zone in Kryta, is also the zone that is the conclusion to the Centaur War that begins all the way back in Queensdale. And for human characters especially, it starts with their tutorial instance as they leave Shaymore, and they fight the Centaurs through Queensdale, out of Shaymore, and then into the Kessex Hills where there are a ton of meta events, into the Gendarran Fields where there are a ton of meta events, and then into the Harathi Hinterlands where there are a ton of meta events. And I'll give a shout out to the Modniir Ulgoth, who is the leader of the Centaurs in this area, who is an incredibly interesting lore character actually, with a lot of background that I always thought was like really interesting. And he's kind of just like a random world boss that you fight at the end of the meta event here, but largely the theme of this entire map revolves around fighting centaurs, where there are just a ton of centaur camps all around here, and anyone who has done the meta event through this area should be very familiar with this entire concept of fighting back against the centaurs, where there are centaur camps and human camps, and some of the camps get captured by the centaurs and you have to take them back, and then you try to take the centaur camps and hold them, but the centaurs can take them back as well. And overall it's just a really cool vibe that basically makes this map kind of feel similar in some ways to like a world versus world map, where you are just fighting a massive war against an enemy where we have a ton of siege weapons and whatnot, and just really cool. In the number 7 spot is Hangman's Saddle, and this is a general area here in the Harathi Hinterlands that has a couple of cool things going on. And basically we have this large like human wall that looks incredible, and it's very like ruined, where it's like an old wall that the humans used to have here at some point, and now it has been captured and taken over by the centaurs, where we see a lot of like centaur fortifications and like this centaur gate and these centaur tents and stuff all around here, just kind of like built up along the mountain and against the wall, which I think is really cool. Where there are a couple of events that go on around here, like this event right here, but we can also come up onto the wall and we can explore this area where there's a cool vista, which I've always thought was a really cool like looking vista. But if we go across here, we can actually find an area that I explored relatively recently in my entire Guild Wars 2 journey, where we have some centaurs here that we can just fight really quickly, and it leads into this little cave that is not really hidden, but kind of just hidden from the rest of the map and protected by these centaurs, where inside this cave there are just like a few cool little decorations that we can see right around here. And then there's even a treasure chest in here that we can open for, you know, 2 blues and a green, so probably not really anything like too worthwhile for you to come here specifically for, but just a cool little secret area that you yourself can explore. In the number 6 spot is Finn, and this is a very interesting character here in the Harathi Hinterlands who is relatively unique, and there are only a couple of other big examples of friendly giants we can find throughout Guild Wars 2, and it's always cool to see friendly giants because they're just very interesting and unique. Where Finn specifically is a really interesting character who we can find in this cave system around here, where he has a bit of a sad past, where he befriended a couple of humans, a woman by the name of Elise as well as her son, and they were friends, but suddenly the centaurs attacked and he tried to defend his human friends from the centaurs, but unfortunately failed, which is just a very sad storyline. And this character is just very interesting with a big backstory. But we can go ahead and come through here to actually find that there are some events around here where he's basically taking care of this gravestone that we can find right here in this very beautiful area. But if we read it, we can see, "Here lies Elise. Her passing came as a surprise to all, including her incompetent doctor," which is a very interesting description given what was going on. But this entire cave system around here is also really beautiful, and as we come around here to the start of the guild rush that goes through here, let's just take a quick moment to just look at how beautiful this area where the gravestone is located. And we can see just so many like skylights, and we have some more graves located right here that we can read. Jimmy McMillian to his comrades, a friend to all else, an amazing chef. We got Jason Scott here, and then we got Commander Ian Shaw at the big gravestone. We got our friend Finn, son of Finn, so a long line there. And then Drew Kinsley, to fight everything until the end, never accepted his fate. In the number 5 spot are Bandito and Seraphette, and these are 2 romancing characters, and really this is just an Easter egg to the classic Romeo and Juliet in Guild Wars 2, and just having a very classic stereotypical Easter egg is always fun to see. But these are just like 2 interesting characters, and it's kind of like an interesting story where we have Bandits and Seraph. And when you think about like the overarching story of like Guild Wars 2, or more specifically Kryta, where bandits are very common and civilians and Seraph and other law enforcement agencies in Kryta also have like a ton of people and are very common, where you would assume that there are actually stories where you have like a mom who is a bandit and then her son is a Seraph, and the Seraph will have to like fight against his mom in order to defend Kryta, and that just opens up like the potential for a lot of interesting storylines. Where if you look at what is really just a very basic Easter egg on a more like deeper level, I suppose, these are 2 romancing characters who are on 2 different sides of a war basically, but are still trying to make their relationship work, which is always kind of cool to see. But they are at a very cool and romantic area, where this is another part of the cave system that we were in with Finn, and it still looks incredible in this area as well. And we have this giant waterfall and a little tunnel back there that allows you to get up onto that scaffolding and up onto that vista, and this plays a part in the guild rush as well. And it's just a very cool area featuring 2 very cool characters. In the number 4 spot is kind of an interesting one, and it is the entrance to Lake Doric, where there's a couple of like bugged trebuchet or catapults right there, which is interesting. But we can come over here and see an addition to this map added during Living World Season 3, where when we look at the Harathi Hinterlands as a whole, it has 2 primary entrances, both going into the Gendarran Fields and the south. But we had this area of the road right here with Divinity's Reach to the far west, and there was a gap. And then with Living World Season 3, Episode 4, Head of the Snake, we saw Lake Doric introduced to the game and slotted into this area right between Divinity's Reach and Harathi Hinterlands, which really quickly, I'll just say I love it when Arena does this and adds like areas to like open spots where there's just like a really random gap. But here in Lake Doric, we can see that there's this river going through here, and this river goes into the Harathi Hinterlands. Now, they could have just had this blocked off and you like weren't able to go into the Harathi Hinterlands, but we can chat with this villager here where we can go ahead and go into Lake Doric by chatting with this villager, where we just take like a small boat ride into this area and we arrive right here inside Lake Doric, which is super cool. And then we got a full-blown map portal here that we can go ahead and run through in order to get to the Harathi Hinterlands. And I just love this so much, where I love having the World of Tyria feel interconnected, where you can go from like one area to another, and it just like makes a lot of sense to be able to come through this place. And it's even cooler that it was added like long after the Harathi Hinterlands was originally introduced to the game, where they could have just easily ignored this, but they decided, let's make the World of Tyria feel cooler and more interconnected, and they added this route through here to allow you to enter this map or to enter into Lake Doric should you come from this way. And in reality, it doesn't really serve too much of a purpose other than just being really, really cool. In the number 3 spot is Fawcett's Bounty. It is the jumping puzzle on this map, and I am talking about it as I often do, where this is just a very fun jumping puzzle that features a lot of like cool and interesting puzzles, where the first puzzle is actually completed, where we can go ahead and put boulders on those pressure plates, and then we can come through here, and I actually just got in the nick of time. But then we can come to this area, which is a very interesting little jumping path where we have to jump from rock to rock to rock to rock all the way across. And if we touch the rocks that we aren't supposed to be touching, which are like these kind of like smaller, like random craggy ones compared to these like bigger stones right here, they will actually break and we will fall through to our death into that spike pit that we see down there with all of those skulls. But we can go ahead and just use our raptor to easily get across and get a little sneak peek of what that looks like, which then takes us to a maze full of pirate ghosts. And this is actually kind of a dangerous area where we have to be careful of like all these spike traps while fighting some of these pirate ghosts, and then just taking in the view of like all the different decorations around here with like those skulls on the ceiling and then a bunch of supplies. But ultimately, once you get through it, you can go ahead and come down here to the coolest part of this entire jumping puzzle, where we enter a giant cove with a pirate ship filled with pirate ghosts, and we can see the player that is through here, or 2 players actually. And this is just a very beautiful and aesthetic area, and of course this is most likely a reference to the Goonies, and we see so many different references to the Goonies throughout so many different games, and this is just a very classic vibe that I love a lot. And this entire area is just beautiful looking, and it's really fun to explore through like a very interesting and slightly intricate puzzle, where we then have to do a little bit of jumping to get onto this ghost pirate ship in order to get down into the hole to get our treasure chest. In the number 2 spot is the ruins of Holy Demetra and the Martyr's Tomb, where this is just a very interesting like ancient Krytan ruin that we can see around here that has some ghosts, and it's just a very beautiful and aesthetic area. But it's a pretty important place just for like the ancient story of Kryta, where we see the Harathi Hinterlands for a long time having been a zone full of conflict, where in the modern day it has a lot of centaurs, but there were conflicts against the White Mantle and conflicts against the Char way back in the day in the lore. But we can come into this area to explore the Martyr's Tomb, where we can go ahead and fight some ghosts in here. But if you come to this big chamber right over here, we can actually see that there is this sarcophagus or whatever right here, which is actually the tomb of Saul de Lesio. Well, that's what the White Mantle thought at least, where when Saul de Lesio died during the events of the original Guild Wars, he was entombed here, but in reality his corpse never actually got here at all. So the White Mantle that were protecting this area we're really protecting nothing, because for anyone who has played through the Bastion and the Penitent, you know what happened to Saw de la Seal and that entire story that I have on that. But we can also come to this area to see a very, very cool special place right here where we have this broken statue that just looks absolutely incredible with like these skylights and whatnot. And I just love the vibes of the statue, but this statue is deeply connected to that tomb, because if we slash kneel in front of it, we are going to have a ghost that pops out, an emissary of Duena who we can chat with, and then we can basically ask her like a bunch of questions, and then this allows us to go into the other room in order to fight Tanad the Faithful, the White Mantle Confessor who stood over Saw de la Seal's tomb. Again, basically do nothing because Saw de la Seal's body is in here. But if we come back into this room, and I think we should be able to do this, actually maybe not, we can investigate the tomb, and we can bring forth Tanad the Faithful, where he pops out and is just another ghost, and we can go ahead and defeat this white mantle, and then doing so we can go ahead and open up this chest, which is what some players did right before we came into here. But just a really, really cool lore area with an incredibly cool secret that is super fun to see, and is also just a very beautiful area on top of it all. But now for the number one spot, for my favorite thing in all of the Harathi Hinterlands, and it just has to go to Seraph's Landing. And there is a lot of stuff going on here, so let's go ahead and just run through all of the highlights. Where first things first, we have this really cool looking dock area that I love a lot, and we see bandits coming in out of the marsh and just like coming and stealing supplies. But we can see a lot of cool boats in here, which I think are just really cool looking boats. And then we have this one right here, which is a very, very special one, as it actually goes around the lake into a couple of different areas, and it's just really, really cool to see it just move around to random like places around the lake, basically just doing a lap, I think, for the most part. And it's just a very incredible detail. But then in here we have a really cool looking bar that I love a lot, and it's just a nice like aesthetic of a bar where, you know, we have a bunch of Seraph that are fighting against the Centaurs across the Harathi Hinterlands, and this is basically the Seraph's like primary base of operations, as this is the biggest town in the Harathi Hinterlands. So we have a ton of Seraph coming through here just to get a drink and to try to relax. But then over here into this building right over here, we have a very cool looking tavern where we have a nice like kitchen right there, and we can come down into the basement to just see a bunch of supplies. But then we can also come up to the top floor here where we can just see like some more beds and stuff, and just a very, very beautiful and detailed area where this entire location is just super detailed with like some fun little small things you can interact with, and also just some interesting NPCs that you can chat with, where the task through here is really fun, where you can help everyone out and feed the chickens and the cows and whatnot. And of course it is playing a part in the Centaur War beyond just being a refuge for the Seraph, where if we come back over here we can see this incredibly cool looking Centaur camp among these ruins on the other side of this river that leads to Lake Doric. And I always found this place super, super cool looking, where you can come over here for this hero point. But we have these tents up here that are just phenomenal, because we have this entire hillside up here with these tents, and we can even see these level 20 Harathi sharpshooters and a bunch of centaurs running around in the background, and they are only background details. You can't come up here, you can't explore this area, you can't really do anything here. We have some invisible walls and we can't get past here, and it just serves as some details to this corner of the map to basically further highlight the entire Centaur War that is going on here. And I love that so much. I love when there are like different random details added to the world that you can't really interact with, and they're in the background, and they only serve to just make the world interior feel bigger and cooler, and I think this does that incredibly well. And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed. The Harathi Hinterlands is a very interesting zone full of many different details and secrets, many of which I did not even highlight in this video, where this video was very interesting, where I tried something a little bit different just to spice up my top 10 series, and I would love to hear what you think about it down in the comments, where I'm probably not going to do another video like this in the future, but if people happen to really enjoy it, maybe I will. But if you like this type of video, consider watching my recent top 10 things in the Gendarran Fields, or go back to Queensdale and watch my top 10 things in Queensdale video as well. I hope you all are taking great care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.